I'm a Vedanta teacher. I also take classes in meditation, which is really how I started in all of this. My wife and I started Vedanta classes out of our home. In fact, meditation classes out of our home, some probably 11 or so years ago. And it gradually moved on from that as we realized that we needed to learn more and more of the basics, the fundamentals of the knowledge base. And so we started to go into Vedanta, and we follow the tradition of Puja Swami Dayananda, who had an ashram in Rishikesh as well as other parts of the world, and is his picture that adorns the main stage. So we take our reference from that. And he's one of the early people who took this Vedantic knowledge and taught it in English. Thank goodness, because my Sanskrit is not strong enough. I don't know about yours, you may be Sanskrit scholars. But English is a good way to hear this thing, and because it's being translated and taught in English, translated from the Sanskrit, is very important to choose the right type of word. So we follow that tradition, all right? And the tradition is Advaita Vedanta. Advaita means not two, all right? So there's not two, there's only one, and so Advaita Vedanta. Where does Vedanta come from? Well, we as human beings require, like all products, we require an operating manual. Has anybody read the operating manual for human beings? No. It was written thousands of years ago, all right? Like most people, like you and me, we don't read the operating manual until we can't get the product to work properly. And then we go to the troubleshooting guide, right, and try and figure out what's wrong with it, and then we read the manual. The operating manual for human beings are the Vedas. This is the original text, originally passed on orally, and then it was written down once Sanskrit evolved and came down through the northwest into India. Then it was actually written down and then passed on in a written tradition on palm leaves. Okay, we take it from the Vedas. The Vedas are classified. We've largely lost a lot of the Vedas. There are something like 1180 Upanishads within the Vedas, but we're down to about 108, of which we tend to study 11, which takes a lifetime. So thank goodness we reincarnate, and then we can have another go next life. So the Vedas are in a number of sections, and the sections are according to where you are in your lifestyle. Okay, so the majority of the Vedas, the early part of the Vedas, the Veda Purva, are all to do with rituals, with actions. What can you do with actions? Because actions always produce a result. So the first part of the Vedas are all to do with what can I do in order to achieve the things I want in my life, right? I want wealth, I want a good job, I want children, I want a partner, I don't want a partner. There's always a ritual that will do that. And that's the early part of the Vedas, because they realized early on that the vast majority of us are only concerned with what we can get. We collect as many toys as we can before we die, all right? And then we think that's it. So the early part of the Vedas said, you want toys? I'll give you a ritual that gives you toys, all right? And you can just stay in the early part of the Vedas and perform the rituals and have a fantastic life, all right? But what they realized is that after a while, you'll know that the objects that you acquire during that process don't bring you the happiness that you need. And you seek something else, what I call the halftime syndrome, right? You're playing football or rugby, you're bashing away in one direction, and then for 15 minutes they give you a slice of orange, and now you're facing the other direction thinking, what are the rules of this game again? because the ball starts in the dressing room and ends up in the dressing room, and you get very tired in between. So the second half syndrome is when you've collected all the toys, you've had the family, you've done all of that, and you've got the house, you've got the car, the bicycle, whatever it is that you wanted to acquire. You think, what's next? All right. And then the Vedas said, what's next is for you to understand who you truly are. And you say, yeah, I want to know that. Please tell me who I really am. And to do that, you need to set your mind in the right mode. And to set your mind in the right mode, you need to have a contemplative mind, a meditative mind, because you want to eliminate the rubbish that's currently in our minds, all right, from day-to-day living. And so it prescribes meditation. Meditation, upasana, is called before any knowledge, in order to prepare the mind. Because preparing the mind, preparing the student for knowledge, is the most difficult thing to acquire knowledge. Right? If you're running around, then you're not going to have the time, nor will you have the space within your mind for the knowledge to come. So it then prescribes meditation. And then it says, here's a prescribed method for you to go and learn. And the end of the Vedas, the Anta of the Vedas, as a result, Veda, Anta, Vedanta, gives you the knowledge sections, the Upanishads. And it's these Upanishads that give the meaning of life. There's a whole series of Upanishads. As I said, we mainly study about 10 or 11, how you count them, right? Mainly because a seriously good monk about in the 8th century wrote down notes, commentaries on these Upanishads, because these Upanishads are written in Sanskrit, and they're written down to be able to be recited, to be sung, because that's the easiest way of passing on that information. Because if you had to write it down on palm leaves, it would take you a very long time. So they were learnt off by heart. So they were verses. And just like any poetry, in order to make it rhyme, you miss out words, you transpose them, and if you take a literal translation of these verses, they don't make much sense. So Adi Shankara was this great monk. He wrote them down, the commentaries, and these commentaries are what we study today. And we study through the parampara tradition, which means that the teacher teaches the student becomes knowledgeable enough to become the teacher, and then passes it on. And it's done in that way so that there is no Chinese whispers. This knowledge does not filter out and disseminate, and people add their own. It does not need any other external input. In fact, the Vedas teach you the mechanisms for teaching the knowledge, as well as the knowledge itself. So that's rather clever. That's the tradition we follow. And we therefore reach out to all the gurus for thousands of years who have passed it down to us. And we do it in the form of a little prayer. So I'm going to start the talk with that. Some of my students here should know it off by heart. All right? And let's start with a little Om, followed by a few verses. So, Om Sadasiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Good. Now, what did I call this talk again? Oh yes, Fast Track to Liberation. I've had almost half an hour to prepare. I thought that was pretty good, really. As somebody said yesterday, you can't get much sleep. I said, we sleep in August. We've allocated August to sleep, so that's not bad. So we're all seeking. That's the nature of a seeker. Is we're seeking liberation. We want to get there. We want to know the meaning of life and all of those other questions. We want them answered. In essence, we're all only seeking one thing. We're seeking happiness. Everything that you do in life is for the purpose of seeking happiness. So, and you want that happiness to be permanent. All right? Everybody wants permanent happiness. Hands up anyone who's achieved permanent happiness. All right? No one. That's why we're a seeker. Right? But permanent happiness is our state, is our natural state. How do we know? Good question. How do we know that permanent happiness is our natural state? Is because when you're happy, do you ever say, oh God, I'm so happy. I wish I wasn't this happy. All right? Do you say the same thing when you're unhappy? You say, no. When will I stop being unhappy? I want to be happy again. Right? Misery is not our normal condition. Happiness is in our normal condition. And we're seeking permanent happiness. And what we do, and the first part of the Vedas tell us, we seek that permanent happiness in external objects, people, and situations. Right? Because we think that happiness is derived from other things. Right? So, a partnership with a person, it could be an object, a Porsche, a pen, a watch, iPhone, I don't care. All right? We seek happiness from those things, or a situation, a status, a job, a role, and that'll make me happy. The one thing we find really early on is that happiness does not come from the outside world. How do we find that out? We acquire the thing, and we realize that every single object in the world has 3 fundamental defects, including people, right? 3 fundamental defects. Defect number 1, the pain associated with it. Pain of acquisition. I want a shiny new Mercedes. How much do I have to work to afford the shiny new Mercedes? A great deal. Pain of acquisition. Pain of maintenance. Oh God, it's never going to be as shiny as the day they delivered it. All right? You've got to keep it going. And the pain of loss. Should it leave you, and you didn't want it to leave you. So, the first thing with all objects in the world is pain. Right? The second object is that it's always limited. If you get your iPhone 13, right, you want 14, 15. You haven't got all the iPhones. If you buy one Mercedes, you haven't got all of them. If you buy one watch, you haven't got the whole pack. So everything that you acquire is limited. All right? So the first, pain. Second is limited. The third one is that it enslaves you. Right? Got so hot, I bought an air conditioning unit. Now it's lovely and cool. Everybody else is burning up in the heat and can't sleep, but I got this air conditioning unit. I can turn it on, I get a decent night's sleep, and then the air conditioning conks out. All right? You were the master of this air conditioning unit with the remote control in your hand, turning it off, making it whiz left and right, and then it stops working. Who is the master and who is the slave? All right? You get attached to things so that you become dependent on them. So they bring misery. Sooner or later, this is why we get to the half-time stage. Sooner or later, you realize that all the toys that you've acquired have got these problems. And that's the moment you start turning around and saying that everything that I have, everything that I am, everything that I know does not lead me to where I want to go. All right? What was the point of acquiring them? It hits you actually very hard, very early on. And then you say, I need to learn something. I want permanent happiness. I know I need to figure out where I'm going to go, what I'm going to acquire in order to do so. All right? Everybody goes through this cycle. I went through this cycle. All right? You may think that, he's a born Vedantin. Not so. All right? I'm a computer scientist. I do computer architecture. I was in the early days of microprocessors. wire wrapped the first BBC Micro for those old enough to remember what a BBC Micro is, all right? And, bow tied, got my companies, got all of that. And about 15 years ago, life hits a bit of a brick wall, and you realize that everything I have, everything I know, everything I am, cannot solve the problem that's currently in front of me. What was the point? What was the point? And then you start with first of all, most of you have been here, all right? The self-help books. To do this, you've got a 7-point list. You go through the 7 points and you'll be enlightened, all right? They're really depressing, those self-help books. Because the writers made a lot of money, but I'm poor and I'm reading this thing and I got to stage number 5 and I realize I've forgotten 3 already, and it makes you even more guilty, even more miserable, all right? Then you say, oh, I can't do the reading bit. I'm going to find a teacher. I'm going to find a guru. And invariably, we don't find a guru, we find a mystic. There's a difference. All right? And the best way that I can describe it is that a mystic is the tour guide, whereas the guru is the taxi driver. All right? The mystic, he may be all enlightened, sit there, glows, his aura goes all the way out the planet and back again, and in his presence you just feel wonderful, and then he leaves the room and you feel as miserable as when you came in, all right? A mystic knows it all, but can't take you there, all right? He's the tour guide. Will tell you about the temple, about the palace, everything down to the last picture that's hanging on the wall, who wrote it and what was happening and what was the name of the train driver. But he can't tell you how to get there. Guru will tell you how to get there. And that's very important, because if you're a seeker, you haven't got there yet. How do I know? Because you call yourself a seeker. You seek. Therefore, you haven't got there yet. So you need to know how to get there. Mystics don't help. They're lovely. All right? I could sit back, listen to Sadhguru all the time. Whatever he says, fabulous. All right? But anybody listening to him won't be able to get to him, to the state that he is, by listening to him. That's the sad bit. What Vedanta says is that this is the truth, and I'll teach you how to get there. That's why I love it so much. That's why I teach it, and that's why some students here will say, yeah, we do that. We forget it, and then Ram tells us again, yeah, we do that. All right? The ones that are giggling are my students, by the way. All right? Okay, so that's what Vedanta does, and that's why we teach it in this way. And I too went down this cycle, the self-help books, but I came across one book. It was recommended to me, and it was Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. All right? Strange book. And, of course, as I said, I was a computer scientist, bow tie, at this time living in California. All right? Just east of San Francisco, fabulous. Where you get up in the morning, you say, oh no, another bloody perfect day in paradise. Oh, bugger, I'm not allowed to say bloody, am I? Okay. Okay. So, and in this book, it was a Western psychiatrist who, during the course of events, put somebody under a sort of an altered state and found that they regressed into a past life. All right? Now, of course, being Western, classically Western trained, only believe in ones and zeros. All right? So I didn't believe in reincarnation. And it was a very interesting book. And I read it, and this triggered something within me to say, I need to understand more. All right? The basis of reincarnation cannot be proved. Why can't it be proved? You're not dead yet. Not most of you, anyway. There's a few of you with your eyes closed, but I'm assuming you're asleep. All right? Reincarnation cannot be proved. But there's an underlying provability into it, because it assumes a fundamental law. What's that fundamental law? It says every action has a result. Every action has a consequence. Right? You understand this? Right? If you brush your teeth get cleaner. Everybody understands that every action has a consequence. If there wasn't a consequence, why would you perform the action? Right? It'd be daft to do so. So this is a fundamental truth, and Vedanta says that this is classic. It's a fundamental truth. Every action has a consequence. Every effect has a cause. You cannot have a causeless effect. In order to have something, it must have come from something else. This is where I go into Julie Andrews. Do you remember the song from Julie Andrews? Sound of Music? Nothing comes from nothing. Nothing ever could. Right? For somewhere in my past youth or childhood, I must have done something good. Pure Vedanta. Right? Julie Andrews singing pure Vedanta in Sound of Music. For every effect, there is a cause. Right? I'm an effect. And you have to ask yourself, if I'm an effect, what is my cause? Right? Becomes a very simple question to ask. If every effect has a cause, what's the cause of this particular effect? And that is what you're seeking. Right? And when you seek that, as a money spider is seeking me right now, all right? When you seek that, it starts to trigger all these old fundamental questions. Why am I here? Where did I come from? Where am I going? These are classical questions that have been asked for thousands of people. Have sat in caves and asked themselves, why am I here? All right? It's a perennial question. And therefore, the reincarnation gives you a glimpse into that, because if this is the effect, and the effect has a cause, the cause must have been pre this effect. Right? Otherwise the effect wouldn't have come. So who designs me? Who makes me short, fat and ugly, and all of you tall and beautiful? All right? What is it that triggers me to be the way I am with my particular set of faculties, and everybody else I see seem to have faculties that are better than me? Right? Who does this? And most of the time, you say, maybe that's the big G word. I'm very partial to the G word. If I say it, half the audience go, all right? They roll their eyes. It's God. People say, oh, God created me. All right? Well, if God created me, right, to be this way, why did it create you to be taller? Right? If God can't be partial and say, I'll make this person ugly and that person beautiful. That person have 3 limbs and that person have 4. That would be a partial God. A partial God would be influenced like humans are influenced. Oh, I don't like him, I'm going to give him 3 legs. All right? That would be a partial God, not the total God everybody thinks of. No, it's not God that is the cause of who you are. All right? You are the cause of who you are. Right? There's no other person involved. In order for you to be the effect that you are, it's as a result of a cause which was the consequence of your actions in the past. That's the only thing that determines who you are. Indeed, who you're going to be next time round. What you're going to be next time round. Right? You're a sentient creature. You'll be born as a sentient creature, but not necessarily a human being. So we accumulate actions, and this is where everybody knows the word now, karma. All right? Karma is action. It's not the accumulation of the action. The result of karma is phalam. Phalam means fruit. Literally the fruit of one's actions. Karma phalam. This is often abbreviated to karma when people say bad karma. Right? What they mean is bad karma phalam. They don't know the second word. All right? So we're going to stick to bad karma, okay? Or good karma. And you accumulate it. Every consequence can either be, has two components. One that is exhausted immediately, and one that's a long-term thing. You punch somebody in the face, they punch you back in the face. Immediate result, okay? Long-term, you're no longer friends. Right? Every action has a immediate and a long-term thing. Well, what if this body kicks the bucket before the long-term consequences comes into effect? Where do they go? There's a consequence. The consequence has to exhaust itself, has to run through. And if it's going to run through, it can only run through an experiential body. Right? In order for you to exhaust a consequence of an action, you must have an experiential body so that you can react to another object, another person, another situation in order to exhaust the karmic consequence of the previous action. So it's accumulated during your lifetime. And if you snuff it, then that accumulation goes into a karmic bank. You have a bank account of karmic consequences. It's wonderful, right? And it's got the bad ones, got the good ones. It's all in there. And the bad ones are negative, the good ones are positive. All right? And then when the bank balance just becomes so enormous, it gives birth. And you take a part of that karmic, you make an ATM withdrawal from your karmic bank account, and it's called prarabdha karma. And that withdrawal determines your current life. All right? How you're going to be, where you're going to live, what are your faculties, the main people you're going to meet. All right? Including partners. So, that determines the life you're going to have, because without a life you can't exhaust those karmic consequences. So who have I got to blame for me being me? It's me. There is no one else. And what I do now will result in consequences, will result in another life. Right? This is what reincarnation is. It's the cause for which I am the effect. And it's thinking through this thing that gives you some idea of what you are to know about, right? Because when you start learning, you realize that when you understand something, when something is said to you, you judge it based on what you already know. We always do this, all right? The wife says, turn left, and she's going like that. And you judge it on the basis of her left is right at the moment, all right? We always have an opinion. No, Shunali is fabulous, I have to say. I mean, procrastinate to me, she's the one that gets everything done, actually, here. But after marriage, we were once driving along. It was in North Wales, and you know when it's pre all these map days. You know, it's 40 years ago we'd been married, and she was rotating the map in order to go in the right direction. And we came across some junction, you know, at some point, and I said, "Which way?" And she said, "Up." All right. So you learn to accept what you have in front of you. And the thing is that without accepting what you're hearing, at least temporarily, you're never going to learn anything new. And for this reason, you have to choose your teachers correctly. All right? If you're done Maths A level and you go on to university, and you know the head of the university department, great university with a great reputation, he puts up E equals MC squared. All right? You've seen the equation before. You even know what it's about. Something intangible is equates to something tangible. You have no idea how that can be true. But are you going to say, no, that's not correct? Einstein got it wrong. You don't know enough to do that. All right? You can say, I don't know how to derive that equation, but I'm going to trust that this person standing in front of me from this institution knows enough to be able to explain it to me, so that subsequently I will know what is being said. Right? That acceptance that I'm going to listen to something I don't know in order to be able to verify it subsequently, that acceptance is called Shraddha. Shraddha is not a word we have in the West, right? Because everybody has an opinion. In the West, everybody has an opinion. When you hear something, you immediately then categorize it, you process it against everything that you know. I've got news for you. If new information comes along and you can't process it on what you already know, if you negate it based on what you know, then you'll never learn anything new. And it's that process of accepting the mind to be able to listen to something new from a trusted person, from a trusted source, is Shraddha. All right? Everybody understand this? Acceptance subject to future verification is Shraddha. And this is one of the pre-qualifications of knowledge. And then there's a 3-stage process. It's only a 3-stage process. All right? Enlightenment, the path to enlightenment, the fast track to enlightenment is really easy. Prepare yourself. Know. Be liberated. Right? You can all go now. 3-stage process. Really, really easy. Prepare yourself. Come to know. Be liberated. Okay? But this process itself falls into 3 particular phases. We, in this room, are at the first stage, called Shraddha. Shraddha literally means hearing. You're hearing the knowledge, right? Often not for the first time. It needs to be repeated over and over again. But you're hearing the knowledge with a mindset that says, I accept the tradition from which this is coming and the person through which this is delivered. I'm going to accept this knowledge for now. Right? With complete trust. So Shravanam is hearing it, and hearing it to the level where you can paraphrase it later. So there'll be a test. Right? So that you can paraphrase it later to say, that is what I heard. And I heard that there's no discrepancy about what I heard or what I thought I heard. A wonderful story, isn't it? I did one of these classes once, and we talked about waves and the ocean and things like that. And somebody in the class heard whales instead of waves. And it confused them for the entire class. And they were trying to equate whales to waves and just couldn't figure out the ocean analogy at all. So you must have complete trust in what you've heard to be what was said. All right? That's Shravanam. Next comes Mananam. Mananam is the analysis of that information that you know almost off by heart. You know what was said. Now you're analyzing it. Now is the time to ask those questions. Do I understand the meaning of what has just been said? And you do it over and over again. That's why this tradition is one of a classic live teacher. You ask all the questions. Right? My students will tell you, we do get all the questions. All right? And we provide all the answers in the classes. Mananam. At the end of the Mananam process, you have no more doubts about what you've heard and the true meaning of what you've just heard. All right? You've come to accept it. That's the Mananam process. Most of us don't get there. Right? The Mananam process takes so long, you snuff it before the Mananam is over. All right? So Mananam comes next. If you've got to the end of Mananam, that means you've heard the information, you've now analyzed it, you've accepted it to be the truth. Next comes a very long word, Nitithyasnam, right? And Nitithyasnam is repeated contemplation on aspects of the teaching that you've heard and you've analyzed through Shravanam and Mananam. Nitithyasnam. And Nitithyasnam is a type of meditation. But this meditation is now post-knowledge. So you had all the action part, the early part of the Vedanta Vedas, remember? Oh gosh, Ram, that was so long ago. Do we have to remember that? Yeah. The early part of the Vedas were the actions. Then came the meditation to prepare the mind. Then comes the knowledge. After the knowledge, you meditate again on the components of the knowledge. You're no longer preparing the mind, because you prepared the mind so that the knowledge could go in. You've vacated the space, the 50,000 repeated thoughts that we have all the time. You've vacated that space, and then the knowledge has come in and it's gone to Nitithyasnam. Right? And then when you imbibe that knowledge by repeatedly going into it, it becomes not just what people laughingly called intellectual knowledge. They said, no, Ram, I'm an experiential person. I'm achieving high level consciousness through meditation and yoga. This knowledge bit I can't do. That's all intellectual stuff. Right? I got news for you. There is no knowledge other than intellectual knowledge, because your intellect is the only processing element you possess to be able to process knowledge. All knowledge is intellectual knowledge. All right? And when this knowledge comes, the first thing that it says, you're not the mind and body. It's a shame, because I've just been using the bit that I'm not to try and find out who I really am. All right? You need your intellect, and for your intellect in the mind, you need the body to support it. That's why you need asana to prepare the body. Then you need pranayama to enliven the body, and then you need the meditation in order to prepare the mind. That's why it's an 8-level process. That's why here we have all these tents. Whatever stage you are on that journey, you can come to a tent, and you notice that the fire tent is the smallest tent. It's the top of the pyramid. The higher you go, there's less people around you. All right? But everybody's on their own journey. And this is therefore the fire tent. It's called the fire tent because fire is that by which ignorance is burnt. Hence the orange carpet that you're on. All right? Hence the orange robes. Even the orange t-shirts of the volunteers, because they know the fire tent is over there. All right? They're supposed to know. So you come to this knowledge in that way, and one of the main things that we're trying to eradicate, I can just talk forever, so you have to stop me at some time, all right? The main thing you're trying to eradicate is opinion. All right? Why do we have opinion? Well, you can see opinion based on the fact that you react to what other people say and do. All right? We spend our entire lives reacting to what other people say and do, because we think the happiness is from outside. When they love me, I'm happy. When they don't love me, I'm unhappy. Right? When the car is there, I'm happy. When the car's got a scratch, I'm unhappy. So everything comes in from the outside because I have an opinion. Why do I have opinions? Because, and this leads me to the one word, right, which is the worst word in the English language. Right? The worst word in the English language. No, it's none of the dirty words you're thinking about. The worst word in the English language is should. Whenever you have the word should coming up in your mind, it's time to go and lie down until the word goes away. All right? Should means that you don't accept what has just happened because you think something else should have happened in its place. That's when we use the word should. This shouldn't have been like this. They shouldn't have said that. This shouldn't be happening to me. All right? If the word should comes up, just go and lie down for a while. Eliminate it. All right? Don't use the word should. The stronger the emotion were used with the word should, the strongest is the gap between what you think should have happened and what did happen. All right? And that means you're opinionated. Congratulations, you've graduated. You are a perfect, opinionated individual. All right? And where is it going to get you? Absolutely nowhere. It's the worst use of energy we have as human beings, is trying to figure out that something that has already happened is no longer acceptable to me. It should have been something else. Get on with it. It's happened. It's unchangeable. Don't utilize your energy to change something that is unchangeable. The past cannot be changed. You have to accept it. You have to move on. All right? And you have to move on with the knowledge that the past happened for a reason. Right? It was either my prarabdha karma with which I was born that resulted in that consequence, which was predetermined at birth. Or it was a result of an action I performed in this life, and that had a consequence. In both cases, it's unchangeable. Get over it. All right? Even the present is unchangeable. The moment I've said it, it's already happened. All right? You have to perform your actions to the best of your ability, because once you perform them, it's in the past, it's already happened. Forget it. All right? The only thing you can affect is potentially your future. And even then, right, I'm never going to be a supermodel. There's parts of the future that is never going to happen. You're never going to fly. You don't have the faculty to do so. So our future is also very narrow. All right? And we need to stay within that. We're like giant locomotives. We can go forwards and backwards at any speed we like, hauling any number of carriages we want. The only restriction is we have to stay within the tracks. Right? We're human beings. And therefore we can't see infrared or ultraviolet. Right? Within our faculties, we must act. And what brilliant faculties we have. We're the only being with the capacity to think rationally, right? Or rational thinking to determine how we want to progress. Other animals don't do this. They're instinctive, right? They say the difference between you kicking a dog and you kicking a human being is that 5 years later, when the dog sees you, he'll bite you. And when the human sees you, he'll hit you. The difference is the human has been thinking about it for 5 years on what to do when he sees you next. The dog doesn't care. All right? He lives in the moment. And when that moment arises, he remembers and he bites you. All right? We spend our entire life in the past. Get over it. Because the depression that you have currently, right, is all based on past memories. We don't remember the good bits. Anybody got up this morning and said, thank goodness my eyes open? Anybody did that this morning? All right? Because 1 million people didn't. Every breath that you take is a success story. Try not taking a breath. It's a disaster. We don't remember that. We don't remember the miles that we walk, but when we trip over, boy, do we remember that. And it's that nail's fault. All right? It's always the fault of something else, never ours. So we only remember the bad bits. We don't remember the good bits. Get over the past life, get over the present, affect the future, and take the appropriate action. But what's the appropriate action? All right? How do we know what to do next? Right? Very important question, because often you have a number of situations in front of you. What do I do next? You've got to obey a simple rule. Right? I'm going to take the path of least harm. Dharma. I'm going to take a dharmic path. The path of least harm is my next action. Whether it's least harm to myself or to others, animals, places, environment, whatever, if you have a choice, what do I do next? Choose a path of least harm. Now, it could be with hindsight, that path was not the path of least harm. But you're forgiven because you made that choice with what you know. And as a result of performing that action, you create an experience. And from that experience, you can refine your choice of path of least harm on a subsequent occasion. Everybody follow? It's not difficult. What shall I do now? All right? Path of least harm. And when you start doing that, you start moving from performing actions that are for your benefit to actions that are for the benefit of people and situations other than yourself. You may derive a benefit also, right? The benefit of kindness is mostly a heartwarming attitude, all right? So that is the benefit. So you may be benefiting yourself, but primarily you're benefiting others. And when you do that, your karma, your action, moves from karma to karma yoga. That's what karma yoga means, right? It's not volunteering. Although you can see where it's coming from. Volunteering is that you're trying to help others. Your action, you've chosen an action. I could have stayed home and watched the television, or I could be outside helping some people with my time. You're moving from karma to karma yoga, and you're at the first stage of your path. You're on your journey, right? And a lot of people here, I know, are volunteering, and thank you for those people who are at that stage of their journey. So we realize that happiness is not from the outside, and we realize that we perform the reason we carry on being a seeker and we seek happiness because we haven't found it yet, all right? And we haven't found it yet because we're opinionated. And the opinion what we have, first of all, is of ourselves, all right? We have opinions about three things. There's only three things in the world. There's ourselves, there's all the tangible objects, and there's always the intangible. That's the entire universe, all right? Centered around me. Why? My experience is always from me outwards. And we have all sorts of opinions about ourselves. I'm not bright enough. I'm too bright. It depends on whether you're, inferiority complex, superiority complex. I'm not tall enough. I'm not pretty enough. My nose is whacked. Everything else is fine, but my nose goes that way. Why should it be so? We have personal opinions, right? We have opinions about other objects, situations, and we certainly have opinions about intangibles, love, happiness, or even God, right? We're fully opinionated people, and this opinion needs to go down because we need to determine. Discrimination is the first major attribute that we need to acquire in our preparation process. We need to discriminate between what I want to do and what needs to be done. Right? What do I want to do? I want to do this particular thing to be happy. What needs to be done is this particular action for the benefit of others. The benefit of myself also. All right? A spiritual path may be in a counter direction to a path of experiential happiness. Right? I want to go out today and have great fun over there, or I can go to a talk. Which one shall I do? And they're polar opposites. All right? You can go to the flea market, or you can go to the yoga festival. They're polar opposites. And you have to make that choice. You have to discriminate between what actions now take me further down the spiritual path that I want to go down, or what takes me in the opposite direction. You need that power and discrimination. And after that power of discrimination, you need to be able to detach from that action. What do I mean by that? This is a very difficult stage. All right? So I take a dose of water before I tell you. Okay. Every action, as I said before, has a consequence. There we are. The Shravanam bit is working perfectly. Every action has a consequence. And that consequence will lead to a particular situation, and you'll move on from that situation with another action. All right? This is the cycle that we go around. So, we have a desire. Right? We get up. We have a desire. Left foot or right foot out of the bed first. All right? And then you perform the action. You move your left foot or your right foot. Do I go to the computer, turn it on, or have the coffee first? Right? You have a desire to do whatever it is that performs the action. Every action has a result. Right? And the result, there's 4 variations of the result for every action. Everybody knows this, right? No, everybody? No? Okay, all right. So every action has 4 results, and the best way to remember it is again through another story. All right? Let's say I work at a particular building, and every evening I cross the road, go to the bus stop, catch the bus home. All right? So every evening at the end of work, I have a desire. I want to go home. And what's the action that comes from that desire? I cross the road, go to the bus stop, catch the bus, and go home. Everybody understands this? This is not a difficult story. It's not in Sanskrit, nor is it Vedanta, all right? That's the desire and the action. Now, first of all, the one that happens most often is the result is as expected. I cross the road, I go there, and the bus comes, and I go home. I never think about it. All the times that you ever caught a bus, all right, you never remember it. What do you remember? Is when the bus doesn't come. So the second stage of action, all right, is when it's better than expected. We remember these. What's better than expected? You're standing at the bus stop and a friend of yours spots you and stops and says, "Hey, where are you going?" I say, "Oh, I'm going home that way." And he takes you right to your doorstep. All right? Better than expected. So you're going to have expected, better than expected. If you're going to have a better than expected result, there must be a worse than expected result. Correct? Logical to think so. Worse than expected, you go there and you just realize there's a bus strike, or there's 3 buses in a row that are totally full, they go past you, and it's hours before you get home. Worse than expected. You remember those as well. All right? The last one is completely counter to expectation. You go to cross the road, you never get to the other side. You wake up in hospital 3 days later. You realize you slipped on a banana skin and you were in a coma for 3 days. All right? Completely counter to the action that you wanted out of that desire. All right? We only perform a desire for the expected result. We're very happy for the result that is better than expected. The other 2 we don't want. We don't perform an action thinking, "Oh, let me hope for something that's going to be worse than I expect." All right? We don't do it. We certainly can't think of any counter action. Right? In order to stop these other 2 actions coming, we have a system that we call prayer. Oh God, let me reach the bus stop. All right? That's what prayer is. Because what you're doing in a prayer, you're trying to undermine the system Because there's 4 consequences and you're trying to make it number 1 or number 2 and not number 3 or number 4. All right? Those consequences are not under your control. None of those consequences are under your control because they're beyond your particular actions. It depends on the traffic on the road, depends on the buses that are being driven by completely random people, the bus company, the timetables. There's zillions of things that are happening in the world. All right? What you do does not affect the result primarily. Your effect in the result is tiny. Because the world of potential out there is so large that the result could be anything, any of those 4 consequences. And the first stage in our life, we think that everything that happens to us is as a result of us. The ego gets in the way. But Vedanta says there's 4 outcomes. You can't really control any of them. You think you can control the one expected result based on what you already know. And you know what you already know because you have the intellect as a human being. All right? So what is the primary? We are very privileged to be human beings. What's the primary purpose of a human being? Is to eat as much as you can without getting fat. No. The primary purpose of a human being is to know who you are. All right? Because no other animal is capable of coming to that conclusion. Therefore, you are at the pinnacle of the system. All right? Don't waste it. Adi Shankara says, those who come to be a human being and don't get to know who they are is like committing suicide. All right? Because you've done all of these actions in order to come up to where you are, and then you just waste it. This life is to find out who you are. That's your primary purpose. And when you get to find out, you realize that I'm not the mind and body that I always thought I was. Right? Everything that you've been brought up with, this is me, stand in front of the mirror and say, this is as good as it gets. All right? And Vedanta says, you're not the thing in the mirror. All right? That's the effect. And let me tell you what animates it. So we have this power of discrimination that allows us to choose which path we're going to go down. All right? Between all the actions that are possible. And then we need to be detached from the result, because the result is primarily not due to us. Right? You need to understand this. The result of your actions is not primarily due to you. There's so many factors involved that you have to accept the result of your actions. There's good intention. You must have had a strong desire. Otherwise you wouldn't have got out of bed. But the fact that you fall over immediately, right, is one of the consequences. Most of the time you just stand up and go to the bathroom, all right? The ones you remember are when you stumble and fall over beside the bed. It's not under your control, the consequences. So you need to be detached from the result. And this is very difficult to do. Because your actions are related to people, related to situations. And you could end up looking a fool, right? You could end up looking brilliant. But most of the time you're looking a fool. And then people say, look at him, all right? Don't be, and you say, that's the opinion of others. Somebody calling you a donkey does not make you a donkey, right? That's a fundamental truth. Remember it. Shravanam. You can analyze it later in Mananam. Could I be technically a donkey? No, you can eradicate the doubt in Mananam later, all right? But if somebody calls you a donkey, don't take it badly, because you're never going to be a donkey. Yet we do that. The opinion of others really hurts us. And you've got to say to them, that's their opinion. An opinion, this is very important to remember, an opinion is not the truth. Why isn't it the truth? Because if it's the truth, everybody would have the same opinion. You can't change a truth. The fact that two people have different opinions about the same subject makes neither of the opinions true. It comes both ways. When you have an opinion, it's also not true. It's true for you, but it's not true for others. Yes, you have a question. Right. Is there a microphone you can... So, this leads us perfectly to a nice, if we can have we have plenty of Shravanam. You've heard my voice for a long time. I'm a bit tired of my voice. So, you can ask a question if you wish, and if we have time, we can go into a 10-minute meditation, just to contemplate some of these very simple ideas that we've discussed. You see, I do the Mickey Mouse of Vedanta because there's people in orange robes who really know their stuff. So go to their classes for the deep dive into Vedanta. I will introduce the subject to you and place you in the right environment for you to learn further. Yes, your question.
My question was about opinions. For instance, in the recent case of the pandemic, the scientists were saying that, COVID is an infectious virus. And there were a lot of people saying, no, it isn't. It's not, So there were opinions, and one of them seemed to be the right one, and the other one seemed to be not based on anything. But would you say that the fact that there were opinions meant there was no truth, no ultimate truth on that point?
Right. Very, very good question. So if we get a classic subject of the virus, there's people say, oh, it's not that bad, it's not that good. Some people say it doesn't exist. Other people say it exists. It's based on scientific opinion that it exists and is bad for you. Long-term consequences, they don't know. All the scientific evidence is based on what is already known about viruses. And a lot is known about viruses. And therefore you can have an opinion that's based on all of this experiential knowledge. All right? And then they relate it out to you. Or you can have your own opinion, which is based on absolutely be all. All right? It's on a personal thing. I don't believe it. All right? And that's the lack of Shraddha. If somebody who's studied this all their life and all they've been doing is in chambers with their hands in their gloves and doing experiments behind the glass thing, and they say that this is a bug that can harm you, and I say no, with everything that I know, it's not. All right? Then it's your opinion. You're entitled to your opinion. Is not the truth. They're entitled to their opinion. Is not the truth. Right? Because whatever they're saying is based on what they know. What you're saying is based on what you know and based on what you believe. Right? That's the difference between these two opinions. That's the opinion of the government, of the scientists, based on what they know, what they've studied. Your opinion is based on what you believe. And what you believe is based on what you saw in YouTube. All right? Which, of course, is the truth, isn't it? So you based your opinion on somebody else's opinion, and that is considered to be true, but when you watch the TV and you discuss the opinion of somebody who has some knowledge about the subject, you say it's not true. It's up to you. Right? It's up to you what you believe. You've heard it all. You're in the Mananam stage. First of all, you're saying, from what I know, which is absolutely nothing, I'm not going to hear what's being told to me. All right? And that you're an opinionated person. You're entitled to be an opinionated person. All right? It's wonderful to remain ignorant. That's why I say ignorance is bliss. It's wonderful. All right? But when you know a little bit, it gets really troublesome. When you know a lot, it's not troublesome at all. Because when you know a lot, you can say, oh, 1,000 people are going to die here. 1,000 people are going to die there. The mind and bodies will die. But we shall not. The people, the mind and body will die, but the essential essence of that person is immortal. So what does death mean? Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, Krishna talks about that new bodies are merely like new clothes that we put on when we have roles in life. This mind and body that we think we're so attached to. Remember? Attachment. You must detach. We're so attached to it in such a way that we look after it in such a way that we say, oh, I don't want anything to happen to this body, which is good. Because as long as you have this body, you have the ability to rational thought, to be able to understand who you are. It's necessary to preserve the body. It's necessary to preserve the mind in order to come to know. That's why you need the earlier stages of the 8 limbs of yoga in order to come to know. So it is an opinion, is the answer to the question, and it's perfectly okay for you to have a different opinion based on ignorance. Right? Most people have an opinion based on ignorance. That's what most personal opinion is. Right? I just think that way because I believe that way. Right? It's acceptable. You've got through life so far based on ignorance. Why change now? All right? And then a bit of truth comes along and say, oh, that can't be the truth, because based on my ignorance, that can't possibly be true. That's why you need the Shraddha. Otherwise, the knowledge will come and bounce back out again. You'll never get it back in. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah, please wait for the mic. Yeah, big voice.
In this context, what is intuition, and how do you know that it is intuition and you're to act on it, and it's not just opinion?
Right. So what is intuition? When we perform an action, action is classified as 3 things: thought, word, and deed. They're all actions. We tend to think actions, the last bit is only the actions, the deed bit. But in fact, thinking, saying, and doing, these are the 3 ways that we can act. And when you try to become a pure person, first of all, you don't do the nasty things. And then the second thing is you don't say the nasty things. And finally, you don't think the nasty things. All right? Now, what causes the thinking process? All right? The thinking process is based on analysis of what you already know. Right? Because you can only think about something that you already know. Right? If I say flying pigs, you can think about flying pigs. Not that you've seen them, but you've seen birds fly, and you've seen pigs. So you can put the 2 together, and you have this concept of flying pigs. All right? But it's based on what you already know. All right? So everything that you think about is what you already know. But your knowledge base is potentially deeper than what you know in this life. All right? And therefore, you can have, some people are more open to this, you can have an intuitive sense of something. So some people have this déjà vu. The sensitive people can come to a new environment and say, oh yes, if I just turn right there, then there'll be a church on the left-hand side. Never been there before, but it turns out to be true. All right? They have that sense that they're picking up. And they're picking up from the actions, the memories of the past life, because it's the subtle, we're progressing on here, but the subtle life that travels. It's actually an indicator that the fundamental truth is Advaita. There is only one. We're all just one thing, appearing as the many. So when you have this intuition, you're building up on your knowledge base is building up on the experience of others that you're processing within your mind. The rest is called imagination. All right? You can act on imagination. That's quite good. I want to fly. You can jump off a cliff. It doesn't happen. All right? But you could use your imagination all the way to the ground. But there are people who are sensitive enough to pick up an intuition. There are people sensitive enough to pick up the opinions of others. I know people who are so tuned in their minds that they go into a shopping mall, and when they brush against other people, they actually pick up the positive or negative vibration of the person they brush up against. Right? We're all capable of doing that. It depends on whether we have a mind to do that. Women can do this better than men. Right, by the way, I don't know why. They're more sensitive, more emotional creatures. You know, they say that women have a very, sorry, I'm going to be very serious. The women, but you'll understand. The women have a reason for, if you can imagine a large sort of a cupboard with tiny little drawers, right? A woman would have something in every drawer, and they know where everything is, and they can do it. Men, all right, they'll have some of the drawers empty. And they'll pull it open, and a woman says, "What are you thinking about?" And they say, "Nothing." And, oh boy, this drives my wife so wild when I say, "I'm not thinking about anything." You can't be thinking about nothing, right? Unfortunately, men are very simple creatures. We have these blank moments, and we do have drawers with absolutely nothing in them whatsoever. And occasionally we pull it out just to see that it's an empty drawer. It will never happen to a woman. They're very logical about these things. All right. So women are much more sensitive, and they're much more emotional creatures. They need to be that way because they're the primary caregiver to children. And that emotional bond is much stronger in the female than the male. It's the reason that you are that way is as a result of the prarabdha karma that you're on this earth in order to perform that action. These are the two halves. As I said, you know, the two halves of the primary, the male and female, what the Chinese call the yin yang, all right? These are the two halves that make the whole. You need both halves. Either half does not survive by itself. It's a complete duality, the ground of being and the power that animates. These are the two aspects, and they're tightly coupled. And only when they work really together, these two aspects of our energies make our life complete. It need not be with a partner, but it needs to be with people. We need both sections equally. Any other question? I'm sorry, that may not have answered your question, but it's answered mine. So yes.
Thank you. I have a question because I ponder it a lot. When one has a person, family relationships which are very tricky, toxic, difficult, whatever you want to label them as, because it's my opinion, but it's based on my truth, my fact. How do you deal with that as a person who's trying to awaken and be compassionate and open, and yet every time you do ends up in a spiral? And I kind of reflect, because I've read the book, the Many Lives, Many Masters, and so I really sort of resonated with that, thinking, oh my gosh, that was my husband or something. My sister was, or it's a lesson, it's a teaching is how you deal with these situations. Otherwise, all very well to be joyous and involved with just like-minded people. Actually, our teachers are those that teach us something that reflects in us. But getting past that, how you... I don't know. You probably all got examples.
It's very difficult. I mean, that's why we remain seekers. So how do you get that level of detachment, right? Where you can go from what to so what, right? That's detachment. When you have something that's happening in your face, the first reaction, whether it's a personal thing, whether it's a situation or whatever, the first reaction is what? To turn that into so what, all right, is detachment. And it's hardest with people, of course, because they come back at you again, all right? If these are people that you don't have to be associated with, then you can walk away. It's not your job to convert them, because they're living their prarabdha karma. You're living yours, right? Your job in this earth is not to change anyone else. Is to learn how to change yourself. Because when you learn to change yourself, you look upon the world and the world looks different. All right? So when you look at a person and you think, I don't like this relationship, you have two options. You can move away because they're incidental to your life. They happen to be a tent supplier that you don't want to use again, all right? Or it could be a relative that you have to live with. And at that point, you just have to accept that they are going through what they need to go through. You are going through what you are going through, all right? And you have to accept what they're doing and do the best that you can for them as karma yoga rather than karma, because you have to accept what has already happened and what is already happening now. And here's the funny bit. It's because of that experience that your prarabdha karma has taken you there. Right? That is the teaching that you needed in order to get to the next stage. It's your life experience that's teaching you how to detach, right? And how to elevate yourself beyond the mind. This is a mind and body that's operating. I'm not the mind and body that we'll go to subsequently in the next two talks. So it's that little bit of separation. I can see this mind and body operating. I can see this mind and body interacting with other things. All right. I'll do the best that can be done under the current situation, under my particular resources and facilities. I can't do any more than that. I have to accept what happens as a result. Very difficult to do, especially with family situations. Mother-in-laws, right? You very difficult, very, very difficult to accept. I agree, Lisa. Any other questions? Okay. So, what have we learned so far? You can say, Ram, this is not a very fast track, is it? We've been here for ages, right? We're in this smelly airport. I've got upgraded from economy to business, right? No, nothing on my part. And I've loved the business flight. I've really enjoyed it. I've accepted it, all right? I wasn't accepted in my economy position, stuff like this, but I've accepted the champagne and the business class and the smoked salmon, all right? And they've even given me a free, don't go to jail card. I mean, the FastTrack card, all right? So I've got a FastTrack card and I can get out of this thing really, really quickly. That's what Vedanta, the Vedas are that source of knowledge, all right? You've given, the Vedas tell you how to get this FastTrack card. Now you have to utilize it, right? You have to utilize it to get out of this messy experiential life that's full of the ups and downs, the traumas of life, the good and the bad, right? The ups and the lows, trials and tribulations of life that in Sanskrit is known as samsara. You're to get out of this samsara to a state of freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from samsara. Freedom from the trials and tribulations of life. That freedom is known as moksha. Right? And it is seeking that moksha that makes us a seeker. It's seeking that moksha that brings you to this particular tent rather than the chai or the coffee next door. Right? It's a seeking of that, seeking of moksha. But how do I get it? Moksha is a state of permanent happiness, and I've already raised my hand to say, I'm not in a permanent state of happiness. All right? How do you reach a permanent state of happiness, which is an infinite state? Something that is permanent, does not change, is an infinite stage. Right? You're in a finite life. How do you get from the finite life to an infinite state? And the answer is, you can't. Oh no, what a waste of a morning, right? You can't get from where you are to where you want to be, right? This is, I understand, very bad news for some of you, all right? But the good news is that if there is a permanent infinite state, then there is no state other than that permanent infinite state. And since you are already around, it means that you must already be in that permanent infinite state of happiness. Could have fooled me, all right? You are already in a permanent state of happiness. You just don't know it. Ignorance is bliss. They say ignorance has no beginning but has an end. Knowledge has a beginning and no end. All right? Before you come to know, there's ignorance. Before ignorance, there couldn't have been anything else because you would have known. So ignorance has no beginning but has an end. Vedanta is to bring your ignorance to your end. To know what? You are already on the fast track lane. All right? You are already in a state of permanent happiness. You are already in that moksha. All you have to do is remove the curtain of ignorance. That can only be done through knowledge. You can't remove ignorance through prayer. You can't remove it through Kamal Singh's Ashtanga Yoga. No matter how much he stretches you, you cannot remove ignorance through physical pain. There's only one way to remove ignorance, and that's through knowledge. That's why the last part of the Vedas, Advaita Vedanta, teaches you. It teaches you the knowledge that allows you to eradicate the ignorance, to come to know who you are. It's very simple. It's not rocket science. It's not complicated. If I can get it, you can get it. Because you're already there. Right? You're already standing in the fast track lane and you think that there's a barrier and all the people without fast track tickets are actually leaving the airport quicker than you. It's not true. The lane is open. You just can't see it. And therefore what we're going to do, give you an introduction in the next 2 classes of what some of that knowledge is that can eradicate the ignorance. Okay? Is everybody happy with that? Does it land on a good note? Yeah? It hasn't been wasted then, this morning. Good. And let's complete with a little prayer. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishtate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, everyone.